Say 1, 2, 3, go. Ready? 1, 2, 3, go.
Oh my goodness! That's a lot of bees.
Let's get started here. I guess here's where I say, I'm Jerry and I'm a beekeeper. And I guess you're supposed to say, what, hi Jerry? Is that how it goes? I mentioned before, I had moved to the local area in '04, had planted some fruit trees on the property we'd bought before then, and side of a mountain, didn't know if I would have bees to pollinate the fruit that I had, or fruit trees I'd planted, so I got a couple hives. And that's how I got into beekeeping. And I have to say that for me, the challenge of keeping bees has been very important, and I'll touch that in a second. But for right now, you're here today, and the purpose of this session is to help you decide, do I want to do this or not? And I'll start off by saying, keeping bees is not like keeping pets. Beekeepers don't train the bees. If anything, it's the other way around. The beekeeper has to learn from the behavior of the bees what to do or stop doing to help the bees maximize their numbers and their honey production. Fortunately, the bees have been producing excess honey pretty much forever, and they're quite tolerant of both our well-guided and our misguided efforts. If you're going to become a beekeeper, strongly urge you to join a local beekeeping association. Jeff and I belong to the New River Valley Beekeepers Association, and most Floyd County residents that join will belong to those. There's also Mountain Empire Beekeepers headquartered in Wytheville, and Blue Ridge Beekeepers in Roanoke. If you're further out than that, check the web, you'll find some others. Also, if you're going to become a beekeeper, strongly urge you to get some instruction beyond the brief overview we give here. We have a beginner's class, there's some information on that in your handout, and we'll discuss that a little more as we go on. But for now, let's talk about the highs and lows of beekeeping. Honey. We know all about that. It's wonderful stuff, perfect food, never goes bad. They found honey in the Egyptian tombs. Crystallized, all honey will eventually crystallize. You warm it up, it goes back liquid. The honey was still good. Great stuff. Body absorbs it without digestion. It is just wonderful stuff. We have pollination as another reason for doing that. If you have a garden, odds are your produce is going to be better if there are honeybees there enhancing the pollination process. And we're going to talk about neighbors in just a second, but that's going to relate to them as well. In addition to pollination, pollen is something you can collect from the bees and sell as a way to make some additional money. Beeswax and propolis. Beeswax, we're all familiar with that term. The bees produce the wax themselves. They draw out comb and foundation. We'll give you examples of that in just a few minutes. But you can make things from the beeswax. Candles, lotion bars, lip balm, polish for skis, snowshoes. There's a million uses for the beeswax. Propolis, not as well known. This is the kind of sticky glue that the bees develop from the resins that they gather, and they use it to caulk and to waterproof the inside of their colony. It has some great antiseptic qualities, so we can make an iodine substitute. We have many uses for it. Varnishes have an ingredient that, propolis is one of the ingredients in a kind of varnish that can be used. In fact, it's been used on some of the world's best violins. The Stradivarius has that in there. You can collect propolis and sell it if you choose. It's great to do something good for the ecology. We've heard that the bees are struggling a bit, and that is indeed true. Gives you a chance to get outside in the fresh air, and it's a hoot. It is a challenge. For me, that is why I've stuck with it. I get into my colony, and okay, I see what's going on and I want to change directions a little bit. Let me try this. Nope, that didn't work. Let me try this. Yes, got it. And it is the great sense of satisfaction when, fortunately, my successes seem to be outnumbering my failures. There are going to be some highs and lows, but that sense of satisfaction to go along with the wonder of being a part of some of God's great creatures here. It is really a hoot playing with the honeybees. Problems. Okay, this is the downside. Honeybees are wild creatures. You will get stung. It's going to happen. Personal belief is that if you were the average person walking around and once every couple of years you get stung by something, ow, son of a gun, that hurts. But the shock value, because you weren't expecting it, unfamiliar with it, that makes it so terrible. Now, a honeybee sting, in my opinion, is not nearly as bad as a yellow jacket, wasp, hornet. And I can get stung now and I'll be, ow, yeah, that still hurts. And 10 minutes later I know I got stung. Where was that again? It just doesn't stay with me. It's not that big. The shock value is not there. Yeah, once in a while I'll swell a bit. But it's just not a big deal, and it's certainly not something that happens every time I go to the apiary, or every other, or a few times a year. And beekeepers, depending on what they wear and how docile their bees are, will have different results. But it's not a reason not to pursue beekeeping. Honeybees will swarm. What is swarming? It's springtime, the nectar's coming in, the bees are reproducing rapidly, the numbers are growing, and they decide, we can make 2 out of 1. So the old queen and about half the bees will leave, and they will leave behind the other half the bees and some queen cells from which a new queen will emerge. And when they leave, they're going to form in a ball somewhere, generally within 100 or 200 yards of the home colony, and they'll send out scout bees to go find a new home. And they'll look very much like this, just that glob of bees there. And it looks very intimidating and dangerous. And oh my gosh, bring the kids inside. The bees are never more docile than they are here. They have nothing to protect. They've gorged themselves on honey before they left, and they're just waiting for the scout bees to come back and report, we found a place, let's go check it out. Fortunately, this one was 5 feet above a sidewalk. They don't get much easier than that to capture. And some of you saw the video earlier. Just hold a box underneath, shake them in, put a lid on. I just caught bees. Most of them aren't that easy, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. All right, now Gabe, I want to move the box in here close. When I tell you, I want you to help shake that branch. I'm going to say 1, 2, 3, go. You ready?
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, go.
Oh my goodness. That's a lot of bees. I'm gonna smush them. Oh wow. All of them are trying to fall. Did the queen make it?
If all the bees stay in here, that means we got the queen. If they all fly back to the branch, that means we did not get the queen.
Yeah, they're flying back to the branch.
Well, some of them will.
But not all of them?
Over here, Jay, the entrance.
Are they flying back out? All of them are.
Not so let's get a bee brush.
He's like, get back in there. her stick's getting in. I'll grab it out. Can I grab it?
What?
This.
Okay, good. Hold on. Okay. So we see a whole bunch down here at the opening. And we hope that we're going to see a lot of those going back in. Now, we'll see some gathered up here on the branch, because that's where the queen's scent was. But in a little while, they ought to realize the queen's not there anymore and come back down here. So we'll check it out later and see what we see.
When neighbors see this, that can be very intimidating to them. So a part of your public relations will be informing them, nothing to worry about here. This is a natural part. It's fascinating. Bring the kids out and watch. Neighbors may object. Wait a minute, you got stinging insects over there. We don't care for this. But if you share your honey, and if you point out that that garden you have there, those fruit trees, the produce is going to be better because I have bees. And frequently they turn into strong advocates.
Especially when you share honey with them.
That's a good deal. Insurance. I happen to have USAA, and I called and said, hey, what's the deal with the honeybees? And they treat it just like I had a horse or a snake or something else, and not a problem. But your insurance may treat it differently, something you'll probably want to check. Zoning. I'm not aware of any town that says, no, you cannot have bees. They have bees on the top of high-rises in New York City. So an urban area is not a reason not to do beekeeping. Some of the townships will have ordinances that restrict what you can do. You can only have so many if your lot is this size. You need to have them so far away from the property line, perhaps. Or you need to have the entrance facing away from a sidewalk, for example. So check your local zoning. And the law. I'll mention state apiarist bee inspectors. These are really our friends. Any bees that are transported across state lines, or any bees that you sell within Virginia, or if you sell used comb, they must be first inspected to make sure that there are no obvious diseases. This is a good thing. The inspection is free. Does that mean I have to register my bees? No, it doesn't. You can keep your hives, don't have to register. You can sell honey, don't have to register, don't have to tell anybody, with the possible exception of Uncle Sam. But the law, in this case, you do want to make sure that you are taking advantage of the opportunity to have your hives inspected if you're going to be selling bees, and selling bees can be quite lucrative. Where are you going to keep these? Well, the bees are going to need shelter, and they collect 4 things: pollen, nectar, propolis, and water. In addition, they're going to need some morning sun. All-day sun is great. Morning sun is really pretty important to them. It warms them up earlier in the cool mornings, so they can start much earlier in their foraging. You don't want to have them on the top of a windy hill. Likewise, you don't want to have them in a bowl where the cool, moist air collects. You want to have them near a source of water. How close is near? If you're within a couple hundred yards of a stream, that's going to be fine. I take a 5-gallon bucket of water, put it about 50 feet away from my colony, and put the little kids' bath toys, the ABC 1, 2, 3 floaty toys on the top, so the bees can land, get their drink, and take off. And that works just fine. Protection from pests. In the example here, you see a 5-strand electric fence powered by a solar-powered charger. So I don't have to run a cord from the house. That works just fine for keeping out most of the critters. The smaller ones, skunks, possums, they'll still come through, and you have to deal with those separately. If you take the class, we'll go into more detail on that. Out of sight, out of mind means generally right beside a pretty busy road is not the best place. It kind of invites trouble sometimes. We have had occasion where a beekeeper has had his hives stolen. So we don't want to make it quite as easy for any potential thieves. And easy access means if I'm trying to lift a box of honey that I've harvested, it's heavy. This is a problem all beekeepers love to have. But it's great if I can bring some kind of a wheeled conveyance relatively close, and I don't have to schlep it 200 yards uphill to get to my car, truck, four-wheeler, whatever. There is some equipment you're going to need. You have a handout that talks to that in some detail. Protective equipment means what you're going to wear to keep you from getting stung. Tools for working it, and then what we call the woodenware. Those are the different boxes. And if you're going to attend our class, we'll urge you not to buy your woodenware before the first day of class because it's not one size fits all. And we'll go over in class in great detail the different pros and cons so you can decide this is going to be the best fit for me and then order your stuff. But we'll talk about each of these. We have the protective equipment listed here, including a helmet and veil. Jeff, what's...
Yeah, I'll pop this out.
There are different
Need that
varieties here.
That's just the veil.
You can see on the left, one gentleman's in a full-length suit, and another one just has a hat and a veil on and is not even wearing gloves.
This is one I got. There's like an Amazon kind of basics package for beekeeping. There's a saying out there, cry once, or buy once, cry once. So if it's something you think you're going to get into, you might decide to do maybe higher end stuff in the beginning. I wasn't sure I was going to stay in this, so I just bought this kind of basic. It's a jacket and a zip-up combo where this zips shut. And I like to wear a ball cap with it just to keep this at the bright part of my head. And this is what I started with, and I've now moved on to this now.
And this is the veil, and your arms are going to go through this. And it has the dome sight. You'll learn if you take the class, if you ask 10 different beekeepers, you get 11 different opinions.
In my opinion, yesterday is different than the one I'll have tomorrow. So, I like this because I'm going to plan to go this year. I feel experienced enough handling bees to probably even go short-sleeved, because I will tell you, although this isn't a great material, it is hot as you-know-what in July when you need to open up the hives for half an hour or an hour. And I feel comfortable enough handling bees to now go maybe short-sleeved, but always wear like jeans. So you'll decide what works for you as far as your level of involvement.
Most experienced beekeepers do not wear gloves. I'm going into, I think, my 14th year. I still wear the gloves most of the time. If I'm going someplace to an out apiary, one away from home, and I've forgotten the gloves, sure, I'll go into them. Do I get stung usually? No. But it's a personal preference for me. If you choose to wear gloves, you can. If not, you don't have to. Lots of different options.
I'd also add, it's time of year. Like, if you go in the hives right now, they're super protective, super aggressive. I would suit up more because, maybe I need to give them some quick winter feed or something like that. But they're aggressive because they know that nothing should be coming in their hives right now. They're not going out, right? Versus middle of the nectar flow, you can almost do anything to them and not get stung. You really have to be doing something silly. So you can also judge it by time of year, how you react.
In the spring, when nectar's coming in, the bees have one focus: let me go get it and bring it back. And if you stand in front of the hive, which you really shouldn't ever do, they're just going to ping off you. But get out of my way, I got to go. They're not interested in messing with you. They're interested in getting around you to go get the nectar. Not defensive at all. Here's an example of the cowhide gloves. These are about the heaviest you can get. Goat skin is a lighter. And you can get away with just the emergency room type nitrile gloves.
These might be 5 mil, which you can still get stung, but the bees gives you some chances to figure out what you're doing wrong. There's also like 7 or 9 mil where you won't get stung, but again, very, very hot. You don't breathe. So maybe a breathable glove is more for you. It just depends.
We have a smoker.
I just get the brush. And some hive tools. Did you move the smoker? Are you looking for that? This is a bee brush. A turkey feather actually works much nicer than this. You'll learn those little cool tricks. But if you're trying to get, say, bees off of a frame, this works nicely. This is kind of your standard. If you ever just Google hive tool, you'll probably find this. It's got something where you can pry apart those hive boxes as the bees propolize that together, and you need to lift stuff off. You can put that in there. And it's got also this one where you can get between your different frames. And there's also something called a J-hook tool. This is a small version of it, but it also can help you just lift out those frames, pretend you have a frame sitting in the box, you can lift that up, use some leverage. So there's lots and lots of choices. There's combos. You'll have this with the J-hook. I think that's what I wish I would have bought, but there's tons of choices of these.
Okay. The smoker, and you see an example here, is used to puff cool smoke over the bees. For the sake of argument, we'll say it calms the bees. It also masks an alarm pheromone. If a bee stings, there is actually a pheromone there that tells other bees, yes, come hit this spot. And so should you get stung, again, it doesn't happen often, but a little smoke on it, now you've masked the scent, other bees aren't going to be attracted to that spot.
Oh, this is also a bee sting remover. That's not a joke. So to get a little sting, one thing you learn is if you quickly take that stinger out, you get way less venom in you. So smoking the tool for you.
Very good. Okay, standard beehive. We have two examples here. One is kind of the full version, and here's about the smallest version you might want to go with for part of the time. We start with a hive stand, and it basically just has this big landing board in. And think of your bees coming in with a big load of pollen or nectar, like the big jumbo jet coming in windy conditions. And I don't have to hit that little hole exactly. I can get the landing board, then I can walk in. And we could paint that landing board different colors, and it will help the bees recognize this is mine. If I have a row of white, 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 it's tough to figure out which one is mine perhaps coming in. But if they're colored, I know that one's mine. Or mark it with symbols, big squares on this one, triangles on that one. Just a way. Okay, they have a bottom board, and we have an example of that here. It also gives the bees a place to land. They're going to walk in and then move up through their hive. Entrance reducer. Think the Greeks at Thermopylae. If I have just a tiny entrance, it only takes a few guard bees to protect this. Bring it on. Me and my sisters here, we can take you on. I get more bees in here. We've gone a little later in the spring. I can give them a larger entrance to protect. Now, hive's full, strong, midsummer, take the whole thing out, and they have the whole width of the hive body to come and go. We have hive bodies, and these are the places that we want the bees to raise their young. So it doesn't have to be this deep box, and you see an example, this is a deep, or it could be mediums. This is an example of a medium, and I can use the medium as well for a place for the bees to store their surplus honey, the excess that I hope to rob some of later in the year. Inside these, we have frames. Here's an example of a frame with drawn comb in it. I will have given them foundation. This is an example of plastic foundation that has a little bit of wax coating on it. And here we see a plastic and the more flexible, more fragile pure beeswax. You may notice that it has some wires in it to help reinforce. Different choices you can make in foundation, and we'll go over the pros and cons of those if you take the class. There is no one right answer for any of this. It's what's going to suit you best. I know lots of beekeepers who use the plastic. I'm one of those. If I had to do all over again, I'd choose plastic. I can pick any number of folks that use the pure wax. And if they had to do over again, they'd go with the wax. They're comfortable with it, they like it, no wrong answer there. Just weigh the pros and cons and see which you'd like to go with.
By the way, you can also go foundationless. It's difficult as a very, very new beginner without any, because one of the first things you need as a beekeeper, drawn out comb like Jerry has in those frames, is gold. It's the hardest thing to get, and the bees have to create it. It takes a ton of resource. So one thing you can consider also is going completely foundationless. I would argue start with like the plastic, but where I want to go is have them draw their own, all from the beginning. And that has different things to worry about of how to reinforce the frames. So you have, again, to Jerry's point, tons of options. And you can start one way and then modify as you get more experience or you figure out what your preferences are.
Very good. Okay, moving up then, I do want to mention a queen excluder.
I'll stay over here. You can.
And that's basically a wire mesh you see here. And the queen is laying upwards of 1,500 eggs a day, 2/3 of her body weight during the prime time of the laying season. And basically her butt's too big to fit through there. And so I may choose to put that between the hive body where I want the queen to lay and the honey supers where I want to harvest honey. I'd prefer not to have brood in there. There are pros and cons to using that as well, but that is one common tool that a beekeeper can use to keep the queen down below and out of the honey supers. Then we'll have our top covers. On top of this, an inner and a telescoping top, and we have the two of them so that the bees can't glue that top one down, and we have no way to pry it apart, so we use an inner cover, so we do have something we can use our hive tool, pry it off.
I'm a terrible woodworker, and I made both of these. You can tell if you look at them closely from there, they probably look okay, versus, say, these two hive bodies, which were bought and assembled. So you have some choices. If you have resources or handiness and tools, you're more than welcome to also build your own equipment, as long as you respect things like bee space, like Jerry teaches you in the class.
And you can get an idea of, this is the positioning of the frames within a box. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in just a minute, but I wanted you to have an idea what that looked like. You're going to have some equipment decisions to make. As I said, it is not one size fits all. Do I want my bees to raise their brood in deeps or mediums? Do I want 10 frame boxes or 8 frame boxes? What's the difference? Well, the 8 frame is 2 frames less wide, which means less heavy. You can use a medium box, which is maybe 1.5 inches shorter than this medium, for honey supers as well. Less common, but it is less heavy.
I'm an all medium person.
You can use all medium boxes, which means you only have to have one size box, one size frame. There are some pros and cons to that as well. We'll go over that in class. What type of foundation? We already addressed that a little bit. Do I want the pure, natural beeswax and the shortcomings that come with it? Or do I want the sturdier plastic and the shortcomings that come with it? Advantages and disadvantages of both. So some decisions to make. We'll go over those in class, but things to consider if you're going to become a beekeeper. So, how do I start, you ask? Work with me here. How do I start, you ask?
How do I start?
I'm glad you asked that. Okay, you're going to order your equipment. We got a handout for that. Get the equipment ready and obtain bees. Let's go through those a little bit here. Equipment preparation. The deep pocket folks, or the folks that are really constrained on time, may want to order already assembled and painted equipment. I'm too cheap to do that, so I'm going to order the unassembled stuff and take a little bit of time and put it together. If you're going to do this, allow yourself more than a weekend to put stuff together. You're going to use hammer glue, wire if you're going to be ordering the wax foundation to reinforce it, paintbrush primer, and good quality exterior paint to put all the things together. So more time involved if you're going the cheaper option, and you'll decide what you want to do. How do you get bees? You have about 4 different ways. One is you can hive a feral colony, and that means you're going to take bees out of a bee tree or out of someone's house. Remember I said the bees swarm and they send out scout bees, go find us a place. Sometimes under somebody's eaves is where they find. And those bees need to be removed. It's a lot of work, and it really is not for a beginner. If you're inclined to do something like that, urge you to find an experienced beekeeper who does it, tag along a time or 3 before you try it on your own. You can capture a swarm. We saw a little video of that earlier. See something like this on a tree. If it's within easy reach, go for it. Frequently when they swarm, they're going to be 80 feet up in a tree. Not a choice. They might be a foot off the ground under a bush, under a picnic table, on the side of a building. Could be just about anywhere. Some of them are reachable, some of them are not. Don't kill yourself trying to get a bunch of bugs. But the downside, I mean, if you can catch a swarm, it is wonderful. This is the perfect mix of bees, just the right ages, just the right everything. They recruited the right folks to get the job done in starting a new colony. The downside is you can't count on finding one. So even as a new beekeeper, if you can afford it, I would urge you to consider getting just a little extra woodenware in case a swarm becomes available. It's so discouraging. You're going to kick yourself if another beekeeper calls or it's your bees that have swarmed. They're right there, easy to get, but I don't have a box to put them in. Son of a gun. So having that spare empty box can come in really handy.
Or if they filled all your honey supers and they'd like to give you more.
Okay, you could buy an established colony. Jerry, I want to buy a colony of bees from you. I don't care what the price is. I know it's going to be more, and it will. But as a new beekeeper, opening a box and have the bees just kind of pour out, look like that, it can be really intimidating. Much better to have your knowledge and experience grow as the size of the colony grows. So start small, and you're going to learn as you watch the bees expand and become much more comfortable with them that way. That leaves you basically two options. You can either buy a nuke, short for nucleus colony, or a package. I'll touch on packages first. Here's a picture of package. It's basically screened box. These boards are just to keep them from upsetting during shipping, those little slats that correct them. But those are two packages. Inside, under this little lid here, is a can of sugar syrup and a little bitty cage with a queen and maybe a couple of attendant bees inside. Now the bad news is that queen doesn't know those bees. If you take them home and release that queen, they would kill her. Not our queen. Not our queen. So we want to find a way to introduce the queen gradually so that the bees can become used to her. The queen is in a little cage, and one end has candy. And we're going to put that in such a way that the other bees are slowly going to chew their way through that candy. We got to get after that queen. She's not ours. We got to kill her. But she smells so good. But it doesn't matter. She's not ours. And we need a queen. So by the time they've eaten through the candy, the search and destroy mission has become a search and rescue. But we'll teach you all about how to do that in class, or you can watch videos online. The other way is a nucleus colony. Now here's an example of a nucleus, or of a nuke box. If you were to go to a bee supplier, and by the way, in class, we'll hand out several catalogs from different suppliers, but this is a 5-frame box. That's what it is. It just holds 5 frames of bees. I don't have the frames in here, but you can see that's the size of the box. And if you buy a nuke in the spring, you're not buying the box. You're buying the 5 frames of bees to put into your box. So you're going to bring your box to the seller, or they'll come in a little traveling cardboard container. You take it home, put them in your box. But that colony has a queen, has bees that know her, has brood in all stages of development, and from day one, their numbers are expanding. That's great. If I get a package of bees, they don't know the queen, they don't have comb, they've got nothing. And so they've got to draw some comb, accept the queen, have her begin laying, and then 3 weeks later, the first egg has become an adult bee. So for 3 weeks, some of those bees are reaching the end of their normal lifespan, and the number of your bees for 3 weeks or a little more are decreasing, with a nuke going up from day one. So a nuke's going to cost you a little more, and we urge beekeepers, even beginners, consider getting a nuke or the materials to start raising a nuke. A package is going to cost you about $125. A nuke anywhere between $150 and $200. So you're telling me if I overwintered like 4 nukes, I could get over $700. Yep. So that is a...
For those who might be looking at this from a commercial perspective, I would argue that the money is in the bees, not in the honey, depending on what scale we're talking about. So if you're looking to offset costs or something like that, you should have a mind to learn, and Jerry's class covers a bit of this as well, how to create my own nukes, not only for your own purposes, which again we cover in the class, because you're going to lose your own bees no matter how good you are or how bad you are. You'll lose bees as well, so you have your own spare parts, or you have things for sale if you have a surplus.
When can you get started? If you're an experienced beekeeper and you've got some drawn comb and some plies, maybe some frames with nectar and pollen, or honey already in them. You can start a hive just about any time. But for beginners, early spring is the best. That's when the peak nectar flow is going on and the bees can be self-sufficient. So late March to early May is the best time. And if you wanted to become a beekeeper, wanted to be able to take part in that early spring, let's get going, you could go to nrvba.org, and this is also in your handout. You could join. Now, the dues are steep. It's $10 a year. First thing we do is give you a $9 beginner's book. If you join, you will be entered in the roles of our listserv. If we have some dinosaurs out there like me who have no idea what a listserv is, it's an email list of all the members, and ours is called The Hive. So if I'm a new beekeeper and my bees are coming out and there's just a cloud of bees out there, what's going on? And I can send my question into the hive, and somebody who knows what they're talking about will say, you just had some bees that had emerged recently. The young adults, they're coming out and they're turning around and looking back, they're orienting themselves so that when they go foraging, they're going to be able to find home again. Everything's normal, this is wonderful. Whew, great. You get your question answered, or if it was somebody else, you get to see the question, you get to see the answer. So lots of questions that kind of run the gamut and experience level going out there that you're a benefit of, or you get to take advantage of just by being a member. If it comes time to harvest honey, the goal of the first-year beekeeper is not to get honey. The goal of the first-year beekeeper is to get your bees to be able to make it through the winter. So in general, don't count on harvesting the first year. Maybe if it was really good, you want to do a little bit, you can. But when it comes time, the most efficient way to do it is with an extractor, which is like a 30-gallon metal centrifuge. And you put the frames in, spins it around, and you get your honey out. It's about $800 worth of equipment. If you're a member of the club, you can borrow it for free. Cool deal. I've got some nephews or young kids, and I don't know if they're going to get into bees, but it'd be nice to take them down and show them. I don't want to shell out for a whole suit to find out that, no, I want nothing to do with it. Borrow a kid's suit from the club for free. Keep it for a weekend, have the neighbors or the visiting relatives come in and bring it back. So lots of advantages to belonging to the club. Also, the cost of bees is less. $125 for a package for a member, $140 if you're a non-member. Let me see, he said it was $10 to join. It costs $25 more for a package. And I will tell you that the right number to start with is 2. Not 1, not 3, 2. 1, you lose all flexibility. Do I have a queen in there or not? I can't find the eggs, but maybe I'm just real new and I forget what eggs look like. I have trouble finding them. My eyes aren't that good. I'm not finding eggs. I can take a frame from here with very, very young larvae on it, shake the bees off, put it in here. If they do nothing with it, they think they have a queen. If they start building queen cells, they needed one. If I didn't have another hive, I couldn't do that. Lots of different ways that things can go bad if you only have one.
When Jerry says can take a frame, you will. Without 2, I would have only had 1 colony going into my first winter. I started with 2 packages. And having that set of spare parts has saved me, and saved me again this year. So you, please, please, please start with 2 if you can in any way.
Lots of different advantages to having 2 versus 1.
Also, I'd say for a beginner, it lets you know that, is this normal? If this hive is doing this, but this hive isn't, you have a point of comparison. True story, when I got my packages, and by the way, I sat where you're sitting 2 years ago, and I've been through Jerry's class, so this is only my 3rd year beekeeping. When I got my 2 packages home, all excited, Allison was there with me, we're dumping bees in, everything goes great. The second hive, I've got a dead queen on arrival. So luckily the club has contingencies and thought about this, but I'd already started packaging my bees, so I had to close them up. Wouldn't you know, the hive that started with their queen right away day 1 was just a better hive versus the other one that didn't have their queen. I had to go get another one the same day. That alone will let me just take parts from my big hive and give these guys a boost. So it's just simple examples like that. Stuff goes wrong, whether your fault or not.
Now, as a new beekeeper, you're already kind of drinking from a fire hose with the learning curve. So more than 2 can be pretty daunting for most folks. A few can handle more, but 2 is generally considered the right number to go with. You're probably going to have some questions on, so how much does it cost and how much time do I have to invest? I will say that to buy all the equipment you're likely to need for 2 colonies for the first year, that includes 2 deeps and 2 or 3 mediums, because in what I'm going to give you, you're going to buy 5, because you get a carton of 5 mediums at a lower price. If you were to do all that, it's going to run about $800, plus you have the cost of the bees. Now, if you try this, gosh, I tried, and it just didn't work, or other things come up, life happens, I have to give it up. You still have all this stuff and you can resell. Or if you fail the first year, bad term. If things didn't work out as you'd hoped the first year, you got all the stuff to try again the next year. You haven't lost. It's not an investment that is down the drain. Lots of folks getting into beekeeping, and millions of beekeepers across the country. It really is fascinating for lots and lots of us. The third dot, be prepared for challenges, excitement, a great sense of accomplishment. That great sense of accomplishment is what does it for me. Hope it does that for you as well. What kind of questions do we have?
What about the time?
Time, yes. Time is variable, both a little bit from beekeeper to beekeeper. I tend to be more of a mother hen. I want to go in a little more often than I should, probably. But in general, recommend during spring, late March to late May, every 5 to 7 days. You want to take a peek in there, make sure that they're not preparing to swarm. Make sure that things are going great, that all the hives are bringing in nectar. Later in the summer through a good part of fall, every 10 to 14 days, you want to look in there. Then through late fall and winter, it becomes a bit of a depends-on. Depends on what the weather's doing. I can't plan on going in on a regular interval, but, oh, we have a 55-degree sunny day, light winds. Let me peek and see what I see, knock on the side, hear what I hear. That'll tell me a lot about what's going on, whether there's some actions I need to take. But as far as going through looking frame by frame, not doing that. So it's much quicker in the late fall through winter. And it may be, I got to do it now, but like 6 weeks before I have another chance to peek in. Or I looked 10 days ago in the winter, now I got another chance today. Who knows when I might have a chance again? Let me take another quick peek. And we're talking a minute per hive at that point. That answer your question? Very good. What else?
What about at the beginning?
If you want to do like the solitary honey,
Yeah.
solitary bees,
Can maybe answer some of this.
Sure, go ahead.
So one thing would just be create bee hotels. Obviously you don't keep solitary or other bees like that. There's very few of those other bees that live in colonies like honeybees. So if you want to do that, I would say my advice would be if like you're not sure about this and you're just like, I just want to help bees, plant a bunch of flowers, don't use pesticides, encourage your neighbors to do the same. You do way more that way. Bee hotels, a great site that I think a lot of us in the Bee Club use and people in general is called Honeybee Suite. She's big on not just honeybees, but how to build different structures for them. That would be how you would do that. Also, by the way, one thing we don't really talk about a lot in the course, and there's probably a minority of beekeepers, is top bar hives. So that's a different version. There's certainly a lot of books. I think you might cover them briefly. Mm-hmm. There are certainly some beekeepers that you can commiserate with in the club who do top bars. I think quite a few do a combination. So some people prefer top bars, some people prefer this, some people do both. So that'd be another option, not for your solitary bees, but I think in that case, bee hotels, look at bee hotels would be.
Bee hotels, you may think of, let me take a long stick of bamboo, cut it up into a bunch, bundle them together, now I got a bee hotel, where the hollow things. But solitary bees are called that for a reason. Where a honeybee colony at its maximum may have 50,000 bees or more. Solitary bees, you're looking at, by comparison, onesies and twosies, a very much smaller number. Can they help you? Yes. But they're not going to have the impact that a colony of honeybees will, or multiple colonies. And as far as top bar hives, what is that? If I just had a frame that had a top bar and not the other 3 sides, and I put that in a colony. And the bees, gosh, we have to make comb somewhere. They will attach it to the top, and it'll start kind of in a U shape, and then it'll fill out. That is a top bar hive. It has some advantages. It has a bunch of disadvantages. We'll talk about that a little bit more in class. In general, we would urge first-year beekeepers to go with what this is called a Langstroth hive, after Lorenzo Langstroth back in the 1850s, who came up with some of the concepts that we use here in a movable frame. If you, after having 1 year of experience under your belt, you decide you want to move into top bars, I would encourage that, but too many of the beekeepers find it too difficult to start with the top bar.
And you can also, if you're smart, put your, I'm looking at you because you nodded, take a Langstroth hive frame, take that size frame, make sure it fits in your top bar, because now you have interchangeables across gear as well. So think ahead. Think about the next question when you're beekeeping. Like one thing when Jerry mentioned where to place your apiary, just a caution, put it in the right spot day one, because moving it later or because of bears or something like that, it's hard and it's painful and it irritates the bees. So, oh, sorry, he was.
How about 11's horizontal hive?
Say that again, please.
Horizontal hive?
Horizontal hive.
That's, I think it takes a concept kind of like the top bar in a way, or like a warrior hive.
Well, it's like you can have anywhere from 17 to 35 frames into one hive. The bees come in, let's say the right side, all of their brood is on to the right side, to the left is honey.
That's probably the same concept as a top bar. It's the same concept where you...
You've got a full frame.
You've got
And
frames.
you've got a wired frame.
Okay.
So
Is it
one could
warrior?
almost compare it to, let me take a deep box, cut off the opening, put another one beside it, cut it off the side, put it beside it. You can do that. It is not in the bee's natural configuration. Think inside a tree where I have a vertical structure. Can you do it? Yes. Are there some advantages? I don't have to lift boxes. It's unconventional. You can't trade equipment as easily, other than the frames, with other folks. But certainly something you can pursue if that's what you want to do. There are lots and lots of different ways to do beekeeping. There's no one right way.
Is urban beekeeping a lot different than, when you have more land?
Is urban beekeeping different than if you have lots of land?
Like,
Certainly to some degree, but the basics are the same. You're going to want to inspect on about the same frequency. Your bees are going to go out and forage a couple of miles in all directions. You don't have a lot of control over what's happening, what pesticides might be used, where your bees are going. But one could argue if I have an acre of land, they're going way beyond that and I don't have control there either. I wouldn't view I'm in an urban setting as being a detriment to beekeeping. You may have other folks that want to go in with you. Hey, Joe next door, how about you and I get a couple hives, we'll do this together and we'll put them on the roof, or we'll put them right out back. That works great. So there are some advantages to urban beekeeping that the other folks don't have.
You can do some things as well, like if you put something, say their hive entrance is here, put just a small fence. It forces them to fly up and out. So if you're like really close by urban people, you don't want your bees like shooting out to a sidewalk like Jerry mentioned earlier. So there's some techniques where just build just a simple structure, just really some slats, and it'll force the bees to go up first so they fly high. So, and that's a pretty common thing. That's nothing special.
I have a similar question. I have neighbors that probably have bees that got boxes out there. I don't know if they're active or not. But I was wondering, is there any problems with competitive hives from the neighbors?
Good question. If my neighbors have bees, is there a problem if I have bees? In general, no, but a common pest, very common pest, common to the point that where if you have bees, you will have varroa mites. If the other beekeeper is not taking care of his colonies, then those mites are going to flourish, or any other pests or any diseases that those pests bring in. And if they weaken, your bees are going to rob them out and bring that stuff back. So it behooves you to rub elbows with that other beekeeper and encourage proper management and care of the bees.
As far as competition for like floral resources, you'd have to be talking tens of or hundreds of hives. Because again, the bees will forage 2 to 3 miles in a single radius. So think about, what is that, a 4 or 5 square mile area they can forage. If there's enough flowers for one, there's probably enough flowers for 10 or 20 colonies easily.
I'm interested in hearing about a different interaction, and that is, I have had an ongoing battle with hornets, wasps, carpenter bees. Since I know that honeybees don't always get along with others, that's one of the reasons they have to defend the hive. Can you talk about positive or negatives about that kind of environment?
You want to go first?
Well, I would say I've been fortunate to not have a yellow jacket robbing problem, even though we have yellow jackets on our acreage, but that's certainly a thing. I'll tell you some of the things I've found in my property. One is robbing by either your own honeybees, so say you have 2 colonies, you go outside, you're a little sloppy with your sugar syrup, or you leave the hive open too long and there's not a lot of other stuff out there for them to get, your own apiary bees will look at that as a resource to go rob. So you might have robbing in your own hive from honeybees or your neighbor's honeybees. It's a common thing, and that's why you use techniques like entrance reducing. There's more advanced techniques that Jerry will talk about of robbing screens. You kind of fool the bees to not know where to go. Yellow jacket robbing is a similar thing. Small entrances help with that. I'd say the same techniques, robbing screens. You have to give them a chance to defend the hive. Other pests, generally, I've only had problems if I have a weak hive anyway. And this is true for disease, for mites, for small hive beetles, another one you'll learn about. Typically, those things become a problem if you already have a weakened or small hive. So the best defense always is a hive and mostly full sun if you can, and have them be strong. Whatever's wrong with them, fix it, keep strong hives. Hornets are not a huge problem for me in my apiary. Certainly people put up things like traps. There's things like hornet traps and yellow jacket traps. There's arguments out there that say that traps actually lure in more than you'd have otherwise. I'm not sure where you land on that. I would caution you against things like pesticides and stuff like that to treat that problem. They may be attracted to the same place your honeybees would like to go. So I try not to. We had a huge paper wasp nest 75 feet from my beehive. They ate a couple bees. I saw them swoop in and maybe kill some stragglers in the front, but they weren't any kind of problem.
So I can't help sell my wife on this by saying, they're going to help fight the hornet problem.
No, they're not interested. The bees are not interested in picking a fight. They're not predatory. All they care about is flowers and protecting their own. Sorry, I'm on video. I got to tell the truth.
You could possibly stretch a little. Look, honey, the yellow jackets are getting killed at the entrance to this colony.
Yeah.
And that is something that you will observe.
I can work with that.
Yeah.
Very
my
good.
wife is allergic to...
If you keep them 50 yards away from the house, then even when you've irritated them, in general, the folks coming in and out of the house aren't going to be affected.
You'd have to try to get stung. Like, you'd have to want to get stung to get stung.
Oh yeah, there's going to be a couple hundred yards back into the woods.
Yeah.
So.
She should just see the good aspects of it. Yes?
So if you go on an extended vacation, do you need to get bee sitters or?
If I go on extended vacation, do I need bee sitters? Depends on. I'll be back in 3 years. Yeah, I get a bee sitter. If I'm going for a couple of weeks, 3-4 weeks, check things before you go. And it depends a little bit on the time of the year. I would be uncomfortable leaving in the middle of April, leaving the bees alone for 6 weeks. A lot happens then.
Yeah.
The worst that's going to happen is that they'll swarm. And you have a much smaller colony when you come back, and half of the force that would have gone out to bring nectar in to make honey out of is now gone. But that doesn't mean they're going to die necessarily. They've been taking care of themselves for a long time. So yeah, in general, 2, 3, 4 weeks, you can plan things out. But if you're concerned and you are rubbing elbows with another beekeeper, mind stopping by and check on them. You're going to go away for 2 months, I'll come over and check on yours. Shorter, a couple of weeks, don't even blink.
I'm wondering a little bit about bee disturbance. So we are going to be doing some construction on our house this spring, and I know there could be, I could place the hives further away, but I'm wondering how they might interact with loud trucks, hammering, sounds.
Good question. How are the sounds of construction and the noise, the banging going to affect your bees? In general, they're not a fan of things that vibrate. So if I were to drop 20-pound rocks right beside my hive, they're going to take exception to that most of the time. Early spring, they're just concerned with gathering nectar, and generally it would be a very, very minor annoyance to them at worst. If we take August, there's nothing coming in. I got nothing to do but sit here and look for an excuse to go after something that might be interfering with me. Things a little bit different. Part of it, a great deal of it, is going to have to do with the distance. If they're 100 yards away, 70 yards away, nothing to worry about.
I did it, like, I was thinking maybe 100, well, maybe about 200 feet away. And they might have trucks going by.
The trucks aren't going to bother them. I would be very surprised if at 200 feet away you have any problem.
I can put like a DR brush mower, basically like from me to Jerry, and they're not fussed by that.
Okay, so mowing too is like...
You want to be careful. If I'm going to go weed eat around, I suit up, and I do it like late evening when they're more inclined to be inside. So you'll learn about when they're more pissy.
Right.
At
Or
times.
very early morning.
Yeah, early morning, late at night, when everybody's put away, do your stuff, or just do it quick, and don't beat on the hives, stuff like that.
And if you're mowing, make sure the exhaust is not going toward the hives.
Right, but and along that line too, there is a cell phone tower that went up near our house, and there's parts of our land where you wouldn't be able to visualize the tower, and parts where you might see it. Do bees need to be protected from like direct?
No.
Not that we
You
know.
only have to worry if they get cell phones, because then they're going to spend all day on them. And
I've just heard that some people theorize this.
there's a theory, there's nothing that backs up any connection to the emanations from cell towers affecting bees. Let me touch just a bit on our 2-day beginners class. It is a 2-day, it's not an either or. The first day is the 8th of February, and there we're going to go over honeybee biology, diseases and pests, more on where to put the hive, more on hive products, things that you can do with your hive to bring in some money, more on the law a little bit, great deal on what size woodenware is going to go for you, what are the pros and cons of each, so that you can make the right decisions for you. Then you've got a couple of months. Go order your stuff, and we're going to hand out some bee equipment catalogs. Doesn't mean you're constrained to those. You can go online, get whatever you want. But that's just offered to you. You're going to assemble it, prime it, paint it, get your site all picked out, leveled, your boxes in place. Then most of you are going to order packages, because nukes are not in great enough supply. So the one who's thinking of, so you're telling me I can make all this money by making nukes? Yeah, and there's a great market for it. An overwhelming market for your nukes. Way more demand than there is supply. That's why most folks are going to have to go with the packages. But right before the packages arrive, on the 11th of April, the day before Easter, we're going to have our final half of the class. And that's the day when we're going to tell you, we're going to concentrate on how to take care of the bees. When do I inspect? Why do I inspect? What do I do when I inspect? Week by week for the first 8 weeks, here's what you should expect to find. Weather permitting, we'll take you out to an apiary and do the hands-on. You will be suited up. You will be pulling out, looking at frames, trying to find the queen, drones, workers, drone brood, worker brood, larvae, eggs. Here's pollen, here's honey, here's nectar. And being able to identify all those where they should be in the hive, so that you've got some background, some experience when your own bees arrive, as opposed to, I read a book, okay, let's do this. If you sign up for the class, then that's $60, and any family members who want to share materials with you, the handouts, can sign up for $30. Any other questions we have?
Weather is not permitting that day, do you reschedule a day you can actually do hands-on?
Great question. If the weather doesn't let us go out to the apiary, Do we schedule another day? The short answer is yes. We will work hard to, we recognize that it took some work to get 50 people together, because there are 50 students in class normally, together on 2 days. To try and find one day on short notice that everybody's going to be available isn't going to happen. So we'll offer a couple dates. And if you can come, we'll take you half a dozen here, 8 of you there, 12 of you here. We'll go to different apiaries and do some hands-on with you as quickly as we can.
And if you're on the fence, by the way, nothing's stopping you from just being a member for a year. It's actually something that people don't do very commonly. But I would tell you that given a year, be part of the Hive, look at the old messages, the current messages, you'll learn so much. And all these things that these people have, like you will have these issues too, or these problems. And then you could also, there's a ton, I would say there's probably maybe 6 to 8 apiary days a year, depending on what we need. So not just the beginner, that this is specifically set aside for beginners, but this is an apiary with anywhere from, say, 6 to 12 hives at any time that needs attention and help. And usually there's a, forgive the pun here, a dearth of volunteers. It's in Blacksburg, same location. So if you'd like to do that for a year, be hands-on for a year, you could do that as well.
He's talking about the club's apiary.
Yep.
And we will announce, okay, this weekend, Wednesday, Sunday, and here's a time. We're going to be out, and the more experienced beekeepers will be at the apiary. Everyone is welcome to come, see what they're doing, ask questions, learn as the experienced beekeepers point out different things that they found, and you'll see their technique, be able to take it back.
Usually there's like a purpose, like, hey, today we need to make splits. So Jerry will help you, we'll talk about how to build queen hotels and some of these advanced concepts. You will see them and what they're looking for and why they make the decisions they make. So just like with your own hives, you should always have a purpose to go in. The apiary days will have, hey, this is our goal for the day. It could just be welfare check, or it could be, we don't have enough feed on, winter's coming, this is the last good weekend, we're going to the apiary, who'd like to come? And so then you can see the whole gamut of, this colony has enough food, this one doesn't, this is how you feed them. Oh no, we just kicked off robbing. Ask me how I know that happens at the club apiary, because we've done it, right? We've made those mistakes in the flesh. So.
I'm assuming you need to have your own gear to come be a volunteer.
Question is, should you have your own gear? Yeah, you should bring your own gear. Make sure it fits you and you're comfortable with it.
If it turns out that I just couldn't get, I didn't plan to get bees this year, but I wanted to go through the course, can I still do the apiary day at the end? For a few folks, yeah, we'll have equipment you can borrow to be able to go do that. One other point that I do want to emphasize here is it is a wonderful thing to have a mentor, an established beekeeper who lives relatively near, meaning not 15 miles away, to whom you can ask questions, lots of questions, most any time you want. And once in a while, that person may come to your apiary. As often as the two of you like, you can go to that person's apiary to learn, observe, pick up tips. You have the opportunity to get a mentor. We have 6 or 8 that are volunteer mentors, and all it takes is send an email out to the Hive. I live here, I need a mentor. And some of our beekeepers are a little shy, and they'll wait for somebody else to answer first. So if you don't get an answer, hey, I didn't get an answer, I want one. And pretty soon the more experienced folks are either going to respond or they're going to light some fires so that someone will respond. You deserve a mentor, we'll make sure you get one.
Is it advisable to get new boxes, hives, rather than used ones?
It's advisable to get new, or can you use used boxes?
Well, like my neighbor has all these boxes. I don't know if he's active or not.
Okay, if I were,
Might have mites or something, right?
the boxes themselves are probably not an issue for mites, particularly if they've been out in the weather where it's cold. Now they may look nasty. You'll want to make sure they're still sturdy. You'll perhaps want to repaint them. The frames that are inside, I would throw away. Those are the things that may have diseases. And before I would use them, I would, at the very least, want a bee inspector to come out and look at them. But odds are, we have a little critter called a wax moth. And we think of them as the vultures of the bee world. when a hive gets weak or equipment is left out there, they're going to swoop in. But once they have been at it, it's not worth saving. They don't bother strong hives. Weak ones they will. But in general, frames, get rid of. If I were worried about the boxes, I'd get a little torch and just singe the inside. At a minimum, wash it with Clorox and let it dry completely. Then repaint, and you can probably use that with no problem.
Is the inside of the box painted?
The inside is not painted.
Not painted.
And bees will chew on and glue up everything, so you typically do not put anything on the inside.
We'll go over that in detail in the class as well. Another question?
If you live in an area where bears are concerned, would it be okay to like build a little fence around the hives and run a strand of electric wire at the top? Would that doing that injure the bees?
It won't injure the bees. I don't know that it would keep a bear out. Bears like to go under and sometimes through. But
You electrify the whole fence.
yes, matter of fact, we had a picture up here. Let me back up to it.
Yeah, you don't want to, if you have bears, don't skimp, because it's not a question of like if, it's when they'll get in. They will destroy the hives.
This is an example of an electric fence, a 5-strand. 1, 3, and 5 are hot, 2 and 4 are neutral, a couple of ground rods, solar-powered fence charger.
There are huge discussions on our Google list about keeping bears out, including tricks of like, you know, the pie tin with the peanut butter on it to entice the bear to enjoy the shock a little bit. So there's lots of people who've had issues with bears in our club. So if that's a concern for you, take care of that at the very beginning.
Yeah, I've seen pictures. I belong to a couple of bee groups on Facebook, and I've seen pictures of hives after bears and
Yes.
just came in and tore them all up. So I was wondering how good way to protect against.
Just like a trailer park after a tornado.
Your small critters like your skunks, if the hives are lower to the ground, they'll kind of claw on the bottom to make the bees come out, and they'll eat them as they come out. But they don't necessarily, I think, devastate the hives. They do make them a little bit ornery, because bees are like, hey, we're always under attack, who are you? But bears are where your real damage is, I think.
Any other questions? Last question I have, a little show of hands. How many of you are contemplating signing up for the beginner's class? Wonderful. Okay, there will be one other session at the Blacksburg Library next Sunday, same time as this one. So if you have any other friends that you think might be interested, get them involved. Thank you so much for your attention.
We have this stuff up here you're welcome to take a look at if you want to see. Some of this is partially drawn. You can see propolis. The smell of bees, I think, is one of the enticements, not just honey, but the propolis to me kind of smells like a spearminty wintergreen something. I don't know. It's just maybe me, my nose. But feel free to come look at some of the gear. If you have any questions, feel free to ask us.
Thank you.